Hi everyone! Let's answer this question. If we can use HTML to build the structure of a web page and CSS to make it look pretty, why do we need JavaScript? This is video number 7 of the Guide to Start Coding series, so check out previous ones to ensure you haven't missed anything. First of all, we need to know the difference between static websites and dynamic websites. Static websites appear the same for every user that accesses them, and often display the same information for all users, whereas dynamic websites can present different information to different visitors. In the earliest stage of the internet, static websites were the only sites that could be consistent. The major examples of static websites are as documentation websites, presentation, newsletter contents, and blogs. Static websites are the best options for you to start a website in the easiest way. In answer to the question, if we are happy with a static website, we are good to go with just HTML and CSS. However, if we want to add dynamic features to our web pages, such as changing content and more complex user interactions, we need to use JavaScript. Front-end developers and back-end developers work on different sides of a website. Front-end development is programming which focuses on the client side or visual elements of a website that a user will interact with. Client-side languages like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Meanwhile, back-end development focuses on the server side or side of a website users can't see. Server-side languages like PHP, Python, Ruby, or server-side JavaScript. To achieve greater flexibility on the front end, dynamic websites require more complexity on the back end. These websites don't store each page as its own HTML file. Instead, web servers build pages on the fly. When the user requests a page, the server pulls information from one or multiple databases and constructs an HTML file custom built for the client. Once the page is built, the HTML file is shipped back to the client or user's browser. To build pages on the back end, in addition to client-side languages meaning HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, dynamic websites employ server-side scripting languages. I mean PHP, Python, Ruby, or server-side JavaScript. Depending on the amount of data that's being pulled to construct a page, this process can get quite complex. However, the user doesn't see any of this process. They only see the web page loaded in the browser, same as with static websites. These days, most websites we use like online stores, social media, membership sites, or even news sites and blogs all rely on dynamic content to some degree. JavaScript is a programming language that was created by Brandon Ike specifically for websites and the internet. For many years, JavaScript code was primarily relegated to running inside web browsers. But the Node.js project changed this paradigm by creating a standalone JavaScript environment that could run anywhere. Node.js is an open-source JavaScript runtime environment that executes JavaScript code outside a web browser. It can be installed locally on any computer to allow the development and execution of JavaScript code. You can also install it on web servers, which allows you to use JavaScript as backend code instead of web browser frontend code. Now that we've covered some background and differences between static versus dynamic websites, let's dive into a few basics of the JavaScript language. You can write JavaScript code inside script tags directly in the HTML, like this. You can either write JavaScript code in a text file named with JS extension like script.js. We will have 3 files in this way: index.html, style.css, and script.js. If you write JavaScript code in a separated file, you need to add a file to your HTML by adding a script tag into the head section. This is similar to the link element that we use to add CSS files to our HTML, except that a script element is specifically for JavaScript. Okay, so far we created an empty text file, saved it with the JS extension, and now we are adding it to our HTML example using a script element. Placing scripts in external files has some advantages. It separates HTML and code. It makes HTML and JavaScript easier to read and maintain. And also, cached JavaScript files can speed up page loads. JavaScript is huge and endless. It might be hard when starting to learn and so easy when you get good in basics. But don't forget, practice is the key. In this video, we are not going to learn how to write JS code. We would like to know its use case in our roadmap. Alright, let's add a dynamic feature to our web page. We can create a clickable button using HTML button tag and then manipulate second paragraph with JavaScript. Here I'm adding button tag at the end of my HTML body. And we can put text inside the element, like click me. To tell the browser what type of button it is, always specify the type attribute for it. Type for this one is button. And if you would like to style button, you can easily style it with CSS. But this one is not a styled one, it's using default styling. As you see, we have two paragraphs here, this one and this one. How can we tell the JavaScript that we're gonna use the second one? We should use the ID attribute. ID like demo or whatever. And JavaScript will use this ID to perform some task specifically for this element. Okay, let's run this one. Yeah, we got a clickable button, but when we click it, nothing happened. Let's jump into our JavaScript file and use this ID attribute to change and manipulate the second paragraph. We need to create a function. And we need to use get element by ID method. It will find an HTML element with ID. Which ID? Demo ID. And then in our HTML, we'll change the element content to hello JavaScript. Let's copy this function name and then get back to our HTML file and tell the button to perform with this function. Unclick. Which function? This function. Okay, let's run it again. Look at this paragraph. Click me, and yay! Hello JavaScript! Excellent! How's it going so far? The main takeaway is learning HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are essential and you need to learn them to become a front-end developer. HTML provides the basic structure of sites, which is enhanced and modified by other technologies like CSS and JavaScript. CSS is used to control presentation, formatting, and layout. JavaScript is used to control the behavior of different elements. In the next video, we will jump into another programming language like Python and discuss key differences between Python and JavaScript, the two popular and powerful programming languages. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, give it a like, give it a share, it would be highly appreciated. And if you have not yet subscribed to the Smartister channel, please hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you soon.